What if the first alien invasion of Earth didn't target the gleaming metropolises but a quiet patch of woods during a routine training exercise? What if the fate of humanity didn't rest on elite special forces but on a handful of ordinary civilians, accountants, teachers, and IT specialists, balancing spreadsheets one day and staring down alien energy weapons the next? And what if the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, a hegemony that had conquered 17 star systems, found themselves facing a primitive species whose most formidable weapon wasn't technology, but something far more unpredictable, something they had been preparing for, in their own strange way, for generations? Prepare to discover the untold story of the weekend warriors who accidentally saved the world. Please wait. Before we start, tap that iCard button in the top right corner and smash that subscribe button. Right now, hit the notification bell so you're first in line when new stories land. Alright, let's dive into the story. The scent of damp earth and pine needles usually brought Staff Sergeant Mike Davies a measure of peace. It was the smell of a weekend escape, a brief respite from the logistics nightmares of his civilian job. But today, the air tasted of something acrid and metallic, a smell that settled deep in his chest and set his teeth on edge. 3 hours before the sky tore open, Mike had been showing Private Miller, the youngest in Scout Unit 7, how to properly zero a rifle scope. Now, that same sky was a canvas of impossible light and thunderous roars, and the trees around them were being systematically vaporized by energy weapons that defied any earthly understanding. "Reynolds, I need that comm link up yesterday," Mike roared over the cacophony, his voice raw. He was crouched behind a fallen oak, the bark splintering from near misses. Around him, the familiar faces of his unit weekend warriors who normally balanced spreadsheets, taught history, or fixed computers were tight with a fear he recognized. But they held their ground. Specialist Wilson, the unit's resident sci-fi enthusiast, let out a whoop mixed with terror as he squeezed off a shot. A high-pitched shriek answered from the treeline. "I mean, terrifying, but also cool," Wilson amended, his voice cracking. Mike didn't have time for cool. He had 20 lives under his command, ordinary citizens thrust into an extraordinary nightmare. They had come for a standard reconnaissance exercise, a glorified camping trip with military jargon. Now, they were humanity's improbable first line of defense. Corporal Lee, taking cover behind an overturned supply truck, yelled, "Sarge, you think these are the same type of aliens the government's been denying since Roswell?" Mike ducked a searing energy bolt that scorched the ground inches from his face. "I think," he grunted, reloading his rifle with practiced efficiency, "that if the government knew these purple squid-faced bastards existed, they'd have given us better weapons than these standard-issue rifles." He sighted an alien figure silhouetted against the unnatural light and fired. The crack of his M4 felt pathetically inadequate against the alien firepower, but the figure crumpled. Reynolds finally got through. "Sarge, command!" Mike scrambled towards him, the comm unit a lifeline. "This is Staff Sergeant Davies of Scout Unit 7. We are under attack by hostile extraterrestrial forces, requesting immediate backup and heavy artillery support." The silence on the other end was deafening before a voice crackled. "Say again, Scout Unit 7? Did you say extraterrestrial?" Mike gripped the unit, his knuckles white. "Yes, goddammit. Aliens. Big purple ones with tentacles and energy weapons. They're trying to kill us. We're killing them back. And we could really use some help out here." Another pause, longer this time. "Have you been drinking, Sergeant Davies?" Just as Mike was about to unleash a torrent of frustrated expletives, another barrage of alien fire sent everyone diving for cover. Specialist Wilson, ever the opportunist, snatched the comm unit. "Give me that. Listen up. Command, this is Specialist Wilson. I've got a video." He fumbled with his smartphone, somehow still functioning. "Sending footage now, and trust me, not even Hollywood CGI is this good. We've got real aliens here, and they're not the friendly ET type." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sounds of battle intensified. Then the comm unit crackled back to life, a new, authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. "Scout Unit 7, this is General Harrington. Your footage has been received and verified. Hold your position. All available forces are being mobilized. I repeat, hold your position. Mike exchanged a look with Wilson. Hold your position was military speak for you're on your own for now. Try not to die. He turned to Reynolds. How's our ammo situation? Reynolds grimaced. Not great, Sarge. We packed for a weekend exercise, not the War of the Worlds. Mike took a deep breath, the acrid air burning his lungs. This was it, the moment that would define everything. He looked at the faces of his unit, scared but resolute. All right, listen up, he called out, keeping his voice steady. We've got unknown hostiles with superior technology, but so far they don't seem too bright tactically. They keep charging information instead of utilizing cover, which means they're either inexperienced or overconfident. Or both, Lee suggested. Or both, Mike agreed. Either way, we use it against them. We're outgunned but not outmatched. Standard guerrilla tactics. Hit and move. Don't stay in one spot long enough for them to zero in and conserve ammo. Make every shot count. Private Miller, his hand shaking, raised it tentatively. Sarge, what if they've invaded everywhere? What if this is happening all over the world? It was the question they'd all been thinking, a cold dread that had settled in the pit of their stomachs. Mike looked at the young private, at the fear in his eyes, and a fierce resolve solidified within him. These were his people, his unit. They signed up to help during hurricanes and floods, not to face down an alien invasion. Then we make these purple bastards regret choosing Earth, Mike said firmly, his voice carrying over the din of battle. But for now, we focus on what we know. We're here, they're here, and we're not letting them past us. He scanned their faces, searching for any flicker of doubt. Clear, a chorus of clear, Sarge, answered him. Some voices stronger than others, but all carrying a newfound determination. All right then, Mike said, checking his rifle one last time. Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with humans on a weekend. The sounds of battle intensified, a symphony of alien energy weapons and human gunfire. The fight for Earth had begun in a quiet patch of woods, led by a handful of part-time soldiers. And as Mike rose from cover, he had a chilling premonition. This was only the beginning. Chapter 2 aboard the Galactic Hegemony flagship, Inevitable Conquest, Fleet Admiral Zix's bioluminescent spots pulsed with a sickly yellow hue, a visual manifestation of her mounting dread. This was not going according to the standard Conquest protocol. A routine planetary subjugation had devolved into a tactical embarrassment, and the latest reports from the surface were only compounding the disaster. They've adapted to our energy weapon signatures, Science Officer Krell reported, her voice pitched higher than normal with anxiety. Her eyes drooped with fatigue. She hadn't rested since the initial contact. They're using the most primitive projectile weapons I've ever seen, literally metal slugs propelled by chemical explosions. But they're aiming for our troops' breathing apparatus with remarkable accuracy. Admiral Zixa slammed a tentacle onto the holographic table, the image of a fallen human soldier flickering. How is that possible? Our combat exosuits have adaptive camouflage specifically designed to hide vital areas. It appears, Krell said reluctantly, her voice barely above a whisper, that the humans identified the breathing apparatus from watching the first casualties. They're learning as they fight. A heavy silence descended upon the war room, broken only by the hushed murmurs of various commanders and advisors. Learning as they fight? That was unheard of in pre-spacefaring species. Commander Lore, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the revelation about the human scout unit, suddenly perked up, his upper appendages twitching with a strange mix of horror and fascination. Wait, how many humans are we talking about here? He asked, his voice cracking. How large is this scout unit? Lieutenant Graz, the young officer from the tactical division, consulted his datapad, his face pale. Based on our initial scans, approximately 20 individuals. 20. Lore's voice rose to an undignified squawk. Our division had over 300 combat-trained warriors. 342. Krell corrected automatically, then shrank back as Lore glared at her. Admiral Zixa paced the command deck, her tentacles clasped so tightly behind her back that the joints creaked. This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. We are the galactic hegemony. We have conquered 17 star systems. We will not be humiliated by primitives who haven't even achieved interstellar travel. Ma'am, Communications Officer Zilb interrupted, his voice urgent. We're receiving reports that human reinforcements are converging on the battle site. Their communications indicate a full military response is being organized. The Admiral froze, her spots turning a pale, sickly yellow. How long do we have? At their primitive vehicle speeds? Zilb consulted his data. Perhaps 2 of their hours before the first significant forces arrive. Zixa made a decisive gesture, her frustration boiling over. Enough of this ground assault nonsense. Prepare the orbital bombardment array. We'll wipe out this scout unit and establish a proper beachhead elsewhere. Admiral, Strategic Officer Vun spoke up for the first time, his voice soft but carrying a note of warning that made everyone turn toward him. Vun was the oldest officer aboard, a veteran of countless campaigns, his wisdom hard-earned through centuries of conflict. When he spoke, even Zixa listened. I would strongly advise against orbital bombardment at this juncture. Zixa's spots flashed with annoyance. Explain. If we deploy orbital weapons, we reveal our full capabilities too early. Vun explained calmly, his gaze steady. Based on intercepted communications, humanity is still unaware of our fleet size and capabilities. They know only that there are alien troops on the ground. An orbital strike would alert them to our presence in their orbit, giving them time to prepare whatever orbital defenses they might possess. Their orbital capabilities are primitive, Zixa protested, gesturing dismissively. A few satellites and a small station. With respect, Admiral, Vun continued, his voice unwavering. We thought their ground forces were primitive too. An uncomfortable silence fell over the command deck as the brutal truth of Vun's statement sank in. Furthermore, Vun added, the loss of a single division, while regrettable, is not strategically significant in the grand scheme of the hegemony. But revealing our orbital presence prematurely could jeopardize the entire invasion plan. Admiral Zixa's spots pulsed with angry reds and oranges, but she couldn't argue with the strategic logic. Vun was right. A single, devastating orbital strike might eliminate the immediate threat, but it would also paint a massive target on their fleet. Fine, Zixa conceded, her voice tight with suppressed fury. No orbital bombardment yet. But I want a solution to this problem immediately. Perhaps, Lore suggested cautiously, his appendages still twitching. We should try to capture some humans for study. If we understand how a mere scout unit could defeat our division, we might better prepare for their actual military forces. Zixa pointed a tentacle at him, a flicker of predatory interest in her eyes. Make it happen, Commander. Assemble a capture team immediately. Lore saluted and hurried off the command deck, a knot of unease tightening in his gut. As he strode through the corridors, he couldn't help but wonder if the Supreme Coordinator had somehow known what they would be facing. The hegemony's propaganda always portrayed conquered species as primitive, easily overwhelmed by superior technology and tactics. But what if that wasn't always the case? What if some species fought back effectively? Lord shook his head, dismissing such heretical thoughts. The hegemony always won. Always. This was just a temporary setback. Still, as he assembled his capture team, Lore found himself being much more thorough in his preparations than usual. The image of those 20 bipeds, holding off a hegemony assault division, was seared into his mind. He needed answers, and he intended to get them one way or another. The fate of the invasion and perhaps his own career depended on it. Chapter 3, Contact.
Den Oklok.
Corporal Lee's voice, tense but controlled, cut through the rustling leaves. Mike swiveled, spotting movement among the trees about 100 yards out. The aliens had adapted somewhat over the past hour, becoming more cautious, using cover, and spreading out rather than moving in tight formations. They were learning. That wasn't good. They're flanking around to the east, Mike observed, his gaze tracking the alien movements. "Wilson, Lee with me. We're going to set up a crossfire. Reynolds, you're in charge here. Keep their attention focused forward." "Roger that, Sarge," Reynolds acknowledged, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Mike and his 2 soldiers slipped away, moving quietly through the underbrush. The aliens had landed in a forested area that Scout Unit 7 knew intimately from previous exercises. It was their home turf, a tangled maze of trees and ravines that had so far helped them hold their own against technologically superior forces. "I still can't believe this is happening," Wilson whispered as they moved into position, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Actual aliens on Earth during my 1 weekend a month. What are the odds?" "Less talking, more moving," Mike hissed, though privately he was thinking the same thing. Of all the scout units in the National Guard in the United States, the aliens had to run into his. Either this was the worst luck in history, or, as his grandmother would have said, they were exactly where fate needed them to be. They reached a small ridge that would give them a good angle on the aliens' attempted flanking maneuver and setup position. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and burning foliage, a constant reminder of the alien energy weapons. "On my mark," Mike whispered, sighting down his rifle at the nearest alien figure. In the hours since first contact, they discovered that while the aliens' body armor was resistant to glancing shots, direct hits to their central mass or their odd, tube-like breathing apparatus were effective. The aliens moved into the clearing below them, obviously thinking they were being stealthy. There were about 15 of them, more heavily armored than the previous groups, moving with what appeared to be a definite purpose rather than just attacking blindly. "Something's different about this bunch," Lee murmured, his voice low. "They're not just charging in." Mike nodded, a cold feeling settling in his gut. The enemy was adapting, which meant they were intelligent and capable of changing tactics. Not good for the long term, but they just needed to hold out until reinforcements arrived. "Steady," Mike whispered as the alien group moved further into the clearing. "Steady, mark." 3 rifles cracked simultaneously, and 3 aliens dropped immediately. The rest scattered for cover with surprising speed, returning fire with their energy weapons. "Down!" Mike shouted as energy bolts sizzled overhead, scorching the trees behind them. "Relocate 3 and move." It was a practiced maneuver, 3 shots, then immediately change position to avoid return fire. The 3 soldiers scrambled away from their initial firing position just as concentrated energy fire reduced it to smoldering vegetation. But as they moved to their secondary position, Mike realized something was wrong. The alien return fire wasn't just wild suppression. It was deliberately targeting them, cutting off certain escape routes with well-placed shots. "It's a trap!" he shouted, just as something small and spherical landed near them with a soft thud. Lee reacted first, diving forward and swatting the object away with his rifle. It detonated in midair, not with the expected explosion, but with a blinding flash and a strange humming noise that seemed to vibrate through Mike's very bones. He hit the ground hard, his muscles suddenly refusing to cooperate. Beside him, Wilson and Lee were similarly incapacitated, their bodies twitching as they fought against whatever effect the alien device had unleashed. Through blurred vision, Mike saw alien figures approaching cautiously, weapons trained on the 3 paralyzed humans. They were the more heavily armored ones he had noticed earlier, their movements precise and coordinated. This wasn't a random attack. It was a targeted capture. Tactical. Retreat. Mike managed to grunt out, though he knew it was futile. They couldn't move, let alone retreat. The humming intensified, and a wave of nausea washed over him. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was an alien face leaning over him, its tentacles twitching with what might have been curiosity or triumph. It was impossible to tell. He had failed. He had let his unit down. The thought was a bitter taste in his mouth as the darkness claimed him. Chapter 4. When Mike regained consciousness, his first thought was that he'd somehow been transported into a bad sci-fi movie. He was restrained on some kind of examination table, surrounded by medical equipment that looked both advanced and distinctly non-human in design. The air was sterile, humming with a low, constant energy. "Wilson? Lee?" he called out, his voice sounding strange in the alien environment. "I'm here, Sarge," came Wilson's voice from somewhere to his right, muffled but clear. "They've got us strapped down pretty good." "Lee's here too," Wilson added after a moment. "He's still out cold, though." Mike tested his restraints. Some kind of energy field that allowed slight movement but prevented him from sitting up or reaching anything important. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at him. They were prisoners, on an alien spacecraft, humanity's first abductees in an actual alien invasion. "Great. Any idea where we are?" he asked, trying to keep his voice level. "Pretty sure we're on their ship," Wilson replied, sounding remarkably calm given the circumstances. "They took us up in some kind of transport. I was fading in and out, but I saw Earth getting smaller below us." Mike absorbed this information with as much stoicism as he could muster. They were deep behind enemy lines, if lines even applied in this context. "Any sign of what they want with us?" he asked. "Well, they haven't started the anal probing yet, so that's something," Wilson quipped, then immediately sobered. "Sorry, Sarge. Inappropriate humor as a stress response." "No, keep it up," Mike said. He could use the distraction while he tried to figure out how they were going to escape and get back to their unit. The thought of Reynolds and the others, still fighting on the ground, fueled a desperate urgency within him. Wilson made a sound that was half laugh, half snort. "Escape from an alien spaceship? With all due respect, Sarge, I think that might be a bit outside our weekend warrior training." "Probably," Mike agreed. "But since when has lack of training stopped Americans from doing the improbable?" Before Wilson could respond, a door hissed open and several aliens entered the room. Mike recognized one from their insignia as probably being an officer of some kind. They'd started identifying rank markings during the battle, a small but vital piece of intelligence. "Greetings, humans," the alien officer said in perfect, slightly accented English, its words emanating from a small device attached to what Mike assumed was the alien equivalent of a throat. "I am Commander Lore of the Galactic Hegemony. You are now prisoners of war and will be treated according to the Hegemony's Conquered Species Protocol." "Well, that sounds ominous," Mike replied, trying to project a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Staff Sergeant Mike Davies, United States National Guard. According to Earth's Geneva Convention, prisoners of war have certain rights, including, your primitive planetary agreements are irrelevant." Lore interrupted, his voice flat. "The Hegemony's protocols will apply. However, you need not fear unnecessary cruelty. We merely wish to understand how a mere scout unit managed to decimate our assault division." Mike exchanged glances with Wilson. They decimated an assault division with 20 weekend warriors armed with standard rifles. Either these aliens had a very different definition of decimate, or Scout Unit 7 had been even more effective than he'd realized. A flicker of pride, quickly suppressed, went through him. "Just lucky, I guess," Mike said casually, shrugging as much as his restraints would allow. "Wrong place, wrong time for your guys." Lore's tentacles twitched in what might have been irritation. "Luck is a concept for primitives who don't understand statistical probabilities. Your unit's combat effectiveness far exceeded our intelligence assessments. We require an explanation." "Would you believe natural human badassery?" Wilson suggested, a mischievous glint in his eye despite his predicament. One of the other aliens stepped forward, examining a device that looked like a high-tech tablet. "Commander, preliminary scans show no significant genetic enhancements or cybernetic augmentations in these specimens. They appear to be baseline humans." Lore's eyes quivered with what Mike was starting to recognize as a surprise. "Impossible. Check again." The alien technician repeated the scan, confirming the findings. "So," Lore said slowly, leaning closer to Mike, his multifaceted eyes studying him intently, "you achieved your combat efficiency without technological or biological enhancement. Merely with primitive projectile weapons and what training?" Mike shrugged again. "That, and we really don't like being shot at by aliens on our day off." He met Lore's gaze, holding it steady. There was a hidden detail here, something the aliens weren't grasping. It wasn't just training or luck. It was something deeper, something inherently human. He just had to figure out how to use it. Chapter 5. Admiral Zixa was not having a good day. What should have been a routine first-stage planetary conquest was turning into a potential career-ender. And the latest report from Commander Lore wasn't helping. "What do you mean they're not enhanced?" she demanded, her tentacles flailing in agitation. Lore's holographic projection flickered slightly. "Exactly that, Admiral. Our detailed scans confirm they are completely standard specimens of the species. No genetic modifications, no cybernetic implants, not even significant pharmaceutical enhancements beyond mild stimulants they call caffeine and energy drinks. That's not possible," Zixa insisted, her voice rising. "They can't be out fighting our troops as baseline organisms." "The evidence suggests otherwise," Lore replied, his projection shifting uncomfortably. "Furthermore, interrogation reveals something even more concerning. These soldiers are indeed part-time warriors, as we suspected. Their primary occupation is civilian. One repairs computing devices, another educates juvenile humans, and the leader apparently manages supply logistics for a commercial entity." Admiral Zixa sank into her command chair, her bioluminescence dimming to a muted blue of distress. "Are you telling me that a group of part-time amateur warriors with civilian day jobs managed to achieve an 87% casualty rate against our elite Vanguard division?" "Yes, Admiral," Lore confirmed, his voice flat. "And according to their statements, they are considered a relatively standard unit, not especially distinguished within their military structure." A heavy silence fell over the command deck as the implications sank in like a lead weight. If these were their part-time forces, what were their full-time professional soldiers capable of? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "There's something else, Admiral," Lore continued reluctantly. "The humans are aware they've been abducted. One of them, the specialist named Wilson, asked if we'd informed their command structure that they've been taken prisoner." "Of course we haven't," Zixa snapped. "Why would we communicate with an inferior species we intend to conquer?" "Well," Lore's projection shifted again, displaying a trace of what might have been amusement. "He suggested that if their command doesn't hear from them soon, they will assume the worst." And how did he put it? "Bring the full might of the United States military down on our alien asses." "Is that a threat?" Zixa demanded, her spots flashing crimson. "I believe it was intended as a helpful warning," Lore replied. He seemed genuinely concerned for our welfare. Admiral Zixa scoffed. "The arrogance, as if their primitive military could threaten the hegemony fleet." "Admiral," Communications Officer Zilb interrupted urgently, his eyes wide with alarm. "We're detecting massive movements of Earth military forces converging on the initial contact point. They've established a perimeter and are deploying what appear to be heavy weapons. Additionally, their global communication networks are buzzing with emergency broadcasts." "Show me," Zixa ordered, her voice sharp. The main view screen shifted to show satellite imagery of Earth's surface, where indeed there was significant military activity around the area where their division had been defeated. More concerning were the images from other locations. Military bases erupting with activity, naval vessels changing course, and aircraft scrambling into the sky. The planet was a hive of sudden, furious energy. "They're mobilizing globally," Krell observed, her voice filled with a dawning horror. "Not just locally." "How?" Zixa demanded, her voice tinged with desperation. "How did they alert their entire planet so quickly?" "It appears," Zilb said, checking the data, "that something called social media spread footage of our troops almost instantly across their information networks. Their governments initially tried to suppress the information, but have now shifted to emergency response protocols." Admiral Zixa stared at the escalating human response with growing horror. This was not how planetary conquests were supposed to proceed. By the time a species realized they were under full attack, the hegemony was supposed to have already established multiple beachheads and disrupted global communications. "Admiral," Strategic Officer Vun said gravely, his voice cutting through the rising panic on the command deck, "I suggest we consider a strategic withdrawal to reassess." This species is not responding according to the standard Conquest models. Retreat! Zixa's spots flashed with outrage. Before the invasion has properly begun, the Supreme Coordinator would have us all demoted to waste management. With respect, Admiral. Vun persisted, his gaze steady. Continuing with the standard invasion protocol could result in casualties far beyond acceptable parameters. Look at the data. If a scout unit could inflict such damage, what will their coordinated military response achieve? Zixa's tentacles twisted in agitation as she considered the options. The hegemony did not retreat, but neither did it throw forces into guaranteed destruction. There was a difference between strategic withdrawal and defeat, she told herself. The hidden detail, the one that had eluded them, was becoming terrifyingly clear. Humanity wasn't just capable of fighting back, they were eager for it. Commander Lore, she addressed the still-waiting hologram. What is your assessment of the human prisoners? Could they be useful as hostages or for further intelligence? Lork hesitated. They are unusual, Admiral. Despite their situation, they maintain a curious attitude, combining defiance with something they call gallows humor. The one named Wilson has been making what I believe are references to their entertainment media about alien invasions, while Sergeant Davies has been systematically memorizing everything he sees, presumably for intelligence purposes should he escape. And do they seem afraid? Zixa asked, searching for a sign of weakness. Concerned? Yes. Afraid. Lore's eyes drooped slightly. Not as much as would seem appropriate given their circumstances. Admiral Zixa made her decision. It went against every ingrained hegemony protocol, but the alternative was unthinkable. Prepare a full strategic withdrawal. We will return to hegemony space and report our findings. This species requires further study before a proper conquest strategy can be formulated. A collective sigh of relief passed through the command deck. And the prisoners? Lore asked, his projection displaying a hint of surprise. Zixa considered briefly. The standard protocol would be to eliminate them to prevent intelligence leakage. But in this case, return them. Their absence has clearly been noticed, and eliminating them might provoke an even stronger response. Besides, she added, trying to convince herself as much as her officers, what could they possibly report that would help them against our technology? She failed to notice the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Commander Lore's posture as he received the order. The hidden detail wasn't what the humans had. It was what they were, and they were about to find out exactly what that meant. Chapter 6. So, let me get this straight, General Harrington said, rubbing his temples as if fighting a migraine of epic proportions. He was seated across a long table from Mike, Wilson, and Lee in a hastily assembled debriefing room. You and your men were abducted by aliens, taken aboard their spaceship, interrogated, and then just returned? Mike sat stiffly at attention, still in his dirty, torn uniform. Beside him, Wilson had the good sense to look slightly embarrassed, though a hint of his usual irrepressible humor flickered in his eyes. And during this entire experience, the general continued, his voice laced with disbelief, Specialist Wilson here was quoting Independence Day at them? In my defense, sir, Wilson said, trying to sound serious, I was trying to maintain morale while gathering intelligence on their capabilities. By asking if they'd seen the movie Where Earth Kicks Alien Ass? The general asked incredulously. It seemed relevant to the situation, sir. General Harrington looked like he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. And you believe they withdrew their forces? The general continued, his gaze settling on Mike. Because they seemed genuinely surprised by our effectiveness? Yes, sir, Mike replied. Based on their questions and reactions, I believe they expected minimal resistance. When Scout Unit 7 inflicted heavy casualties, it threw their entire invasion plan into disarray. Not stopped, sir, Mike corrected carefully. Delayed. Commander Lore made it very clear they were conducting a strategic withdrawal to reassess. They'll be back, just with a different approach and probably a lot more firepower. And whether they've learned their lesson, Wilson added, unable to resist. General Harrington was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Around the debriefing table, various intelligence officers and scientific advisors, hastily assembled from across the country, were scribbling notes or exchanging meaningful glances. The sheer improbability of the tale was almost overwhelming. The good news, Mike continued, seizing the moment, is that we learned quite a bit about their technology, command structure, and tactical doctrine during our time aboard their vessel. They were surprisingly careless about what they let us see. Arrogance, Wilson suggested. They still think of us as primitives, just ones that unexpectedly bite back. That tracks with their behavior during the ground engagement, Lee agreed. They started with straight-ahead assault tactics like they expected us to panic at the sight of them. When that didn't work, they had to improvise. And that's when they decided to capture you for study, the general concluded, the pieces clicking into place. Mike nodded. Yes, sir. I believe they're used to conquering species with minimal resistance. They seem to have an established protocol for it. A galactic empire of bullies, Wilson muttered. Specialist, the general warned, though without much heat. Sorry, sir. Galactic hegemony of bullies. Despite the gravity of the situation, a few chuckles escaped from the junior officers present. General Harrington sighed deeply. In my 30 years of military service, I never thought I'd be debriefing soldiers on alien tactics and technology. But here we are. He straightened in his chair, his demeanor shifting from weary disbelief to grim determination. I want full reports from each of you. Every detail you can remember about their weapons, defenses, ship layout, everything. Our scientific teams will need all the information they can get if we're going to prepare for their return. Yes, sir. The three soldiers responded in unison. And Sergeant Davies, the general added, his voice softening slightly. While I can't officially commend you for fighting off an alien invasion during a routine weekend exercise, mainly because no one would believe the commendation wasn't a joke, I want you to know that Scout Unit 7's actions may well have saved countless lives by giving Earth time to prepare. Mike felt a swell of pride for his unit, for the accountants, nurses, teachers, and IT specialists who had stood their ground against an alien invasion. Thank you, sir. But we were just doing our job. Your job, the general repeated with a wry smile, was supposed to be a simple wilderness navigation exercise. Well, sir, Mike replied with a small shrug, a faint smile touching his lips. Adaptability is a core value of the National Guard. The general's smile widened slightly. The crisis was far from over, but something had shifted. The unknown enemy was now a known quantity, and humanity had a fighting chance. The hidden detail, the very essence of human resilience and adaptability, had been revealed not just to the aliens but to Earth itself. And it was a formidable weapon. Chapter 7. 6 months later, Commander Lore stood nervously before the Supreme Coordinator of the Galactic Hegemony, trying not to let his tentacles tremble visibly as he concluded his presentation. The Supreme Coordinator, a massive, ancient member of the same species as Lore, with bioluminescent patterns so complex they indicated centuries of age, leaned forward on the ceremonial throne. And so, based on our extensive analysis, we believe the species designated humans represents a Category 5 conquest challenge, requiring a full armada rather than the standard subjugation force. The coordinator's voice reverberated through the chamber, a low rumble of power. You expect me to commit a full armada? Because a single division was defeated by primitive bipeds with chemical-propelled projectile weapons. Lore swallowed nervously, the acrid taste of fear in his throat. Not just any bipeds, Supreme One. These humans have demonstrated exceptional tactical adaptability and aggression, even in their part-time militia forces. Our xenopsychologists believe they may be the most warfare-oriented species we have encountered. Explain, the coordinator demanded, its multifaceted eyes fixing on Lore. Their recorded history is essentially a continuous series of conflicts between their own subdivisions. Lore elaborated, grateful for the chance to present the evidence he had spent months compiling. They fight over resources, ideology, territory, religion, sometimes for reasons even they struggle to articulate. They have developed weaponry specifically to kill each other with ever-increasing efficiency. And yet, despite this, or perhaps because of it, They have advanced technologically at a rate far exceeding the standard development curve. The Supreme Coordinator's spots pulsed thoughtfully, a slow, deliberate rhythm. And you believe this makes them a significant threat? Supreme One, with all due respect, Lore said carefully, knowing his next words could either advance his career or end it. I believe they represent not just a threat, but potentially an existential one to our standard conquest methodology. The Supreme Coordinator's spots flashed with alarming intensity, a sign of either great anger or great interest. In this case, Lore couldn't tell which made it all the more terrifying. Existential threat, the Coordinator repeated slowly, savoring the words like an exotic delicacy. Strong language from a junior commander. Admiral Zixa did not share your assessment. Lork suppressed a grimace. Admiral Zixa had predictably done everything possible to shift blame for the failed invasion onto her subordinates. Her official report had characterized the Earth incident as an unexpected tactical anomaly caused by insufficient intelligence gathering by the advanced team. The fact that she herself had commanded that advanced team was conveniently minimized. Admiral Zixa did not spend time in close proximity to the humans, Supreme One, Lore replied diplomatically. Nor did she witness their response when they believed their comrades had been captured. Ah, yes. The Coordinator leaned back, gesturing with a languid tentacle for Lore to continue. Tell me again about this response. Lore activated his datapad, projecting a series of images into the chamber's holographic display system. Within 6 of their hours following the abduction of just 3 individuals from their scout unit, the humans had mobilized military forces across their entire planet. Conventional forces established a perimeter around the initial contact site while special operations units began systematic search patterns. The images shifted to show human spacecraft launching. More concerning, they accelerated several planned space missions, adapting them for military purposes. Our observers noted weapons being fitted to civilian spacecraft at an almost impossible speed, as if they had been designing such conversions as a contingency for decades. Indicating foresight, the Coordinator mused. They anticipated an extraterrestrial threat. Yes, Supreme One, Lore confirmed. Their cultural records are filled with scenarios involving hostile alien contact. They have been rehearsing for us, in a sense, for generations. The Coordinator's spots pulsed thoughtfully. Continue. Most alarming was their information warfare response. Lore brought up new images showing human communication systems and data networks. Rather than attempting to suppress knowledge of our existence, their governments rapidly transitioned to open acknowledgement, unified planetary defense coordination, and what they termed species-wide mobilization. Industrial production was redirected toward military applications within days. Lore paused, gathering courage for his most controversial conclusion. Supreme One, the humans' response suggests they have been psychologically preparing for extraterrestrial conflict for generations through their entertainment media, scientific speculation, and military contingency planning. They adapted to the reality of our existence not with panic, but with something almost resembling eagerness. Eagerness. The Coordinator's eye-talk straightened with interest. Their recovered communications indicate a species that has long imagined this scenario, Lore explained. When faced with the actual prospect of alien invasion, they responded not with the typical disorganization and denial we expect from pre-hegemony species, but with coordinated global action that transcended their usual factional conflicts. The Coordinator was silent for a long moment. The chamber's other attendants, high-ranking hegemony officials and strategists, shifted uncomfortably in the silence. And your recommendation? The Coordinator finally asked. Lork took a deep breath. A complete reassessment of our approach to this species. Either commit overwhelming force, far beyond our standard conquest protocol, or consider a diplomatic approach. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The hegemony did not do diplomatic approaches with pre-spacefaring species. It conquered them as it had done 17 times before. Silence, the Coordinator commanded, and the chamber instantly quieted. Commander Lore, are you suggesting we treat these humans as equals? Not as equals, Supreme One, Lore carefully clarified, but as a species that may be more valuable as allies than as subjects. Their martial prowess, adaptability, and industrial capacity could serve the hegemony's interests more effectively through cooperation than through costly subjugation. The Supreme Coordinator rose from the ceremonial throne, causing everyone in the chamber to prostrate themselves automatically. Lord touched his head to the floor, tentacles spread in the traditional posture of submission, wondering if he had just talked himself into execution or promotion. Commander Lore, the Coordinator's voice rumbled above him. You will assemble a detailed analysis team and prepare a comprehensive strategic report on all possible approaches to the human species. Conquest, containment, and yes, even diplomatic scenarios. Lore's spots flashed with shock before he could control them. Yes, Supreme One. In the meantime, the Coordinator continued, all further direct contact with Earth is forbidden until we better understand what we are dealing with. There was a pause, and then, almost as an afterthought, the Coordinator added, Admiral Zixa is relieved of her command, effective immediately. Commander Lore, you are promoted to acting Fleet Admiral to oversee this analysis project. Lork's breathing sacs nearly seized up in shock. A double-rank promotion. Unheard of. Rise, Acting Admiral Lore, the Coordinator commanded. You will have whatever resources you require for this task. The hegemony does not make the same mistake twice. Thank you, Supreme One, Lore said as he rose, trying to keep his tentacles from trembling visibly with a mix of relief and dread. I will begin immediately. As the newly minted Admiral left the chamber, his mind was already racing. He would need the best xenopsychologists, military analysts, and cultural interpreters in the hegemony. And perhaps most importantly, he would need to review everything they had learned from those 3 human soldiers during their brief captivity. Particularly that odd warning from the one called Wilson. We've been making movies about kicking alien ass for decades. Don't make us turn those movies into documentaries. At the time, Lore had dismissed it as bizarre human humor. Now, reviewing the simulation results and psychological analyses, he wasn't so sure. The hidden detail, the one that had blindsided them, wasn't a piece of technology or a biological anomaly. It was humanity's collective imagination, their ingrained resilience, their almost gleeful anticipation of a fight. And that, Lore realized with a chilling certainty, was a weapon far more formidable than any energy cannon. He had a feeling the hegemony was about to find out the hard way that humans were the wrong species to mess with, even on their days off. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was one planet the hegemony would be better off befriending than conquering. After all, if their weekend warriors could do that kind of damage, Lore shuddered to think what their professional soldiers might accomplish if truly provoked. The fate of the hegemony's expansion, and his own future, now rested on understanding the unpredictable, terrifying, and oddly fascinating nature of the human species. And that was the end of the story. Comment below if you want the next chapter, and hit that like button. Please subscribe, turn on the bell, and as always, keep the last light burning.